is, I can't start it in the first 30 seconds or we're going to get demonetized. Well, the abyss is his nether regions. And basically, because if you go read about the Blood War, right, nobody knows where demons come from, right? And so demons just like pop out of nothing theoretically in the abyss. And various tiers of the abyss are attuned to different demons. And so basically the abyss becomes hyperactive, which tilts the balance of the Blood War. And so, all these higher level creatures have to go react to that. So, if I ever get that off of the ground, like I'm a little shady about it because there's like 2 people now that know this story outside of, everybody on the internet now. But, like I'd play this at some point. Right. And so, they're not supposed to just know that. That's one of those background
things. It's the mystery to be revealed, right? If why is the world perfectly leveled for you, right? Why is it that you can only find level 1 rats and not a level 40 Tarrasque or whatever?
Sure. Right. And I mean, that's fair because I think one of the encounters that I wanted to do was a Tarrasque hatchery type of thing. Cause it's like, I mean, like I said, we're just going to blow the lid off of the power scaling. And I've also said multiple times that it's like, if you can't manage a group of level 20 characters, then I just feel like you're not creative enough. Now I'm saying that out of turn. That's armchair general stuff, because I've never managed a level 20 party, but
are you creative enough? Maybe you're not. And maybe it's an accurate representation or like evaluation of like, you need to be of a high enough level of yourself.
Does D&D let you go past level 20 these? Back when I was in D&D last, there was always that hard cap of level 20, and at level 20, you're immortal somehow. Either your name is immortal, or you're physically immortal, or the apotheosis thing, or whatever.
Right. Like most things in D&D, it's totally up to the GM, right? Sure. I don't believe 5th edition has official rules that take you past level 20. At level 20, you're basically, you're supposed to be up. Elminster is a bad example, but you're supposed to be up near that level because Elminster, depending on which era you're in, is like an avatar or a god, So like, he's, anywhere from the messenger of the goddess of magic to literally the god of magic to whatever. But anyway, you're one of those legendary heroes, right? Like you're going to go down in the history books theoretically, like that type of level. Yeah. But in like 2nd and 3rd edition, they've had rules to take you all the way out, as far as you wanted, more or less.
I remember that. I remember that too.
Yeah, you get some like level 40 stuff, and like those were the guys that were like you would hunt and kill the gods. It was like those types of campaigns, types of stuff. Yeah. So it depends on the DM. And like I haven't gotten far enough to decide for that world, like how much like the gods are mortal or are they part of the fabric of reality types of stuff, where it's just like, what does that look like? But I think at least in one point I had played around with the idea that they would, they'd have the option to ascend if they want. And that's my thing. It's like, I try to be fluid enough and also anticipatory for my group to just see, what kind of, small number of paths they might take and just prepare for those. And so like, a couple of my worlds are cataclysmic, or apocalyptic or whatever. And so I want to have a reason for that. You don't have to go find out. That's not the point of the campaign. The point isn't to go discover it. It's just like, if it really bothers you, because it would bother me, why is the world like this? Then you can go and explore it. Right. So.
Right.
Well, because they keep electing gnomes into head office instead of the elves, obviously.
That's the water world, actually. And the gnomes didn't cause the problem, but they're helping everybody out. So, no, yeah. So, I mean, one of the other ones is like I have one called Stormrack based off of one of the source books that I was using, but it literally is basically a water world. And it's not a water world because of like, the ice caps melted or anything. It's a water world because they opened a gate to the elemental plane of water and it just flooded the whole world. But what's funny about the gnomes is like the gnomes were they're the Star Trek or they're the guys that survived basically, so they're running around in airships and stuff like that while everybody else is Stone Age floating on rafts and floating cities and stuff. The gnomes are still mostly intact, but But yeah, so anyway, we don't have to talk about my weird ass campaign
I
ideas
do
all day.
think
So.
Wait, we're live?
The approach to having a cataclysmic or apocalyptic world is interesting because it allows for that level of world building, big mystery stuff, while also completely enabling murder hobos, if that's what you guys want to do.
No, I mean, maybe come out of Ben's mouth.
Right. Yeah. There's like if they say
he lives in California, he knows murder hobos.
They get some quest in some hub city, and they just said, I don't feel like doing it. Who's going to stop them? Right. It's not like the Empire is there or whatever. Right.
Yeah. I mean,
regional powers. So if they wanted to, as I know that's, but I don't think that murder hobos are something to really encourage. But I think they're just kind of inevitable with a certain kind of player personality.
Luckily, the group that I have, we don't really have anybody that at that level right now. Certainly, we've had. We got random. We've got some other stuff, but they mostly internalize it with their characters and whatnot. We have had a guy who just straight up like murdered a key NPC once, and that basically derailed the campaign. And we didn't play very much longer with that guy after that, which is a bummer because he was really, really close friend and stuff like that. But I think we just kind of decided like D&D wasn't his game, and for some reason he decided to like lash out about it or something. But but yeah, so it's like we've had stuff like that. But yeah, I do try to just roll with the punches. And it's like one of the things that I started brainstorming about this Stormrat campaign, because I've had the idea longer, is that I wanted it to be fully open world in the sense that it's like, like, look, I'm going to give you a couple of pitches. Like these are the story hooks that I've got in mind. If you want to latch onto these, like if you want to do the Firefly thing, that's basically what this world was designed for, right? If you want to just sail around being quasi pirates and anti-heroes the whole time, that's great. But here's the rub, right? The world is spinning when you're asleep, and if you're fucking off and whatever else that you think that you're doing, it's not like the greater powers are just sitting around. And so like it's not like I'm amazingly deep with it, but it's like I do want to get to the point where there are key events that happen in the world, and if you don't stop these, bad things happen because heroes need to be around to stop these. And it's worked out a lot better to be in that mindset with the current Eberron campaign that I'm running, because that's how Eberron works. Eberron is one bad day away from the apocalypse basically every day. And the only thing that keeps the world spinning is heroes. And so when my heroes go and screw off and don't follow the main campaign, bad things happen. Or even, because it sucks and the world sucks, even if they do go to do something else. Like I did one situation where they went to a bulletin board because they worked for a big organization. They just got random jobs that day. And so it was a bunch of little like side quests that I had prepped for them. Well, based off of the ones that they picked, they had a different adventure, obviously. And then the one that they didn't pick, people died, and so it's like, on the one hand, the one that they picked was a big mystery. And if they hadn't followed that, then like, yeah, something would have happened. They would have missed out on some really random world building that I included. But if they had gone the other way, they could have literally saved like a dozen people, because basically their organization had captured a living spell, which is another thing Eberron introduced, and it broke containment. And in order to get it under containment, like dozens of people died because they're not the heroes. And that's how that would work, and so it's just like even little stuff like that. So it's like, if you want to go murder hobo somebody or whatever, then like to me, I don't know why we're playing D&D if that's the answer, because to me D&D is about the magic. It's about the heroics and stuff like that, so it's like I probably just wouldn't even run a game for murder hobos if that was the slant they wanted to, like the slant they wanted to take, unless we had all agreed up front, right? Like if they suddenly turned into murder hobos, it'd be like, yeah, this isn't really my jam, this isn't what we're doing or whatever, and I'd probably find a way to button it up. But
see, now I got that Fairly Odd Parents quote of, those are real fictional people in real fictional danger.
Right, that's funny.
You should do an Outer Wilds type campaign. If I feel like that would be good for murder hobo stuff, since everything resets anyway. Like you're on a essentially a time limit where the world blows up, but it's in a time loop, and the whole point of the story is you're supposed to figure out how to either stop it or change it or whatever. but it gives you the opportunity to keep bounce around and fuck around. And you can only stop it as you learn things. But if you want to spend 3 campaigns just dithering around, you could, because you're just going to blow up and you're going back to normal anyway, except for the knowledge that you learned.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool idea. I'm not 100% confident I'm clever enough to pull that off, but I think that'd be a cool thing to brainstorm. So, but, yeah,
I'm just good at ideas. I can't actually run these things.
Sure. Yeah, a ton of my stuff is just like, ad lib, what's improv, types of stuff where like I got my framework and whatever, but like that's where I find myself gravitating towards, is that I'm doing pretty good with the outlining, and I try to get into the details, and I know an immense amount about the world. So if they want to dig way deep into the lore randomly, which they often don't, but I'll be there with the answers, right? And so that's been kind of fun, where it's like, actually the reason why this terrorist religious sect over here is hunting also the bad guys that you're hunting, it's not because they suddenly turned over a new leaf, but because they find their orders heretical to each other, and things like that. And so like I gave them like, a 5-10 minute breakdown on like the reason why the bad guys and you are on the same side isn't because they're not bad guys. It's just because they found a common enemy with you. And it's funny because
one of your enemy is not your friend. They are also your enemy. Just stay out of their way.
In this one instance, you have found yourself aligned with the Nazis. You probably ought to rethink that, But one of the players has totally dug into the fact that he's the black sheep of the party, and he's found allies or is trying to make inroads with 2 otherwise bad guy factions. And one of them I'm playing a little bit lighter, more. This is going to get some enemies right now, so bear with me, but more Brotherhood of Mutants bad guys, right? Where it's like they're fighting for their lives and they're doing bad things along the way type of justification. Whereas the other guys are like, mostly we just like killing people, which isn't, that's not their motivation, but that's how they're going to be presented, is like they're just going to show up and ruin shit because they're the bad guys. Like there needed to be mustache twirling, truly bad guys. And then the real bad guys of the campaign are the existential, other bad guys and whatever. But the same guy who's the black sheep is playing a crazy character, which kind of plays into it a little bit, because he's also somehow tapped into my headspace, and he's already figured out the entire campaign. He already knows who's pulling the strings, and he's got no business knowing that. There's been no build up to it. He's just like, oh, I built this character perfectly to figure this out. And I'm like, how did you just do that? Like I purposefully omitted certain information to give to you guys that would otherwise plausibly be, like open public information. I omitted that and shied you away from it so that you wouldn't accidentally build a character that would just unravel the campaign. And so, yeah, it's it's
clear he's your black staff and he's just using mental magic.
Right.
Because every party should have that one guy that's like, well, I mean, if we have to go and team up with the Nazis to get the Ark of the Covenant for the good guys, we might as well.
He wishes he was as cool as Ebenezer, but yeah, he's like 98% unhinged, but that other 2% is like platinum truth and knowledge about the campaign. And it's like,
well, that's just Deadpool then.
Sure. Yeah.
Just because someone's unhinged does not mean that they are incorrect.
True. Just because you're not paranoid, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, like this guy is that level, type of thing. So
do you ever do unreliable narrator or NPC kind of speaking in code with a weird zonked out perspective rather than telling him to him straight, right? Rather than just a straight exposition man who happens to know exactly the answer to the question you're asking. It could be some kind of indirect thing, or some kind of unreliable narrator, or I don't trust those guys. They're doing whatever.
Yeah, not like purposefully, in that sense, but I do give them, a lot of nonsense with a couple of nuggets, right? Where it's just like, wait a minute, there were some proper nouns in that sentence. We should go to the warehouse and we should go investigate the open house, because one of their early hooks was, I'm trying to remember how they even came about it, but they basically got sent to a clinic that was investigating a crop, like a rising up, like new kind of plague. And that was probably part of what it was, is that, it was like, hey, there's something weird going down in the poor quarter. You should go investigate that. And when they talked to some of those people, they found out that some of their people weren't getting the help they wanted. So they went to go check out this new cult in town. And that's another thing about Eberron, is like, there's just thousands of cults, right? Especially in Sharn, which is magical New York. And so, it's like, okay, cool. So where do these guys go? Well, they've got a warehouse set up where the cult has been doing open houses for the last couple of weeks. So that's where they went to go investigate it. And that's where they took a concept that I had introduced as literally just a stamp on a wine bottle as the symbol of the organization. And they met that up with the cult that is doing the things, and basically went to the open house. And then, of course, the expose of the open house. And I really shouldn't be talking, because maybe one day they're going to watch the video and whatever. But
if someone is smart enough to think, hey, this guy talks all the time, and sometimes it's recorded.
Right. Yeah. So the cult is basically a lift of the the unitologists from Dead Space. And it's been really good, because I finally was like, I played through Callisto Protocol and didn't like it. And then I was like, well, Dead Space was better. And guess what? Dead Space 2, I never finished. So I need to go back to do that. And then I'm like, well, Dead Space 3 is next. So I might as well play that too. So I'm getting all of that head canon stuff, because while they're not necromorphs, there's a lot of similarities to my monsters and the unitologist cult and everything like that. And so straight up, it's not like the same guy or whatever, but they use a lot of the same turns of phrases, and the idea is the same, that convergence is what the unitologists call it, but these guys are just talking about the unity, that we should all be one, because basically they're mimics that grow up to be doppelgangers that it's not gray goo, it's like a pink goo situation, where it's like there will be peace once we're all together, because we're all going to be in the same pool of biomass. Yay, peace. Isn't peace great? That's basically the alien justification. So yeah. So
if you want to do unreliable narrator, you should make it where there's a kingdom, and the king is like a recluse. I don't know, his wife died or something. So he hands out all his edicts through his court jester, who's kind of like, speaking in riddles and doing crazy stuff. And so they got to figure out where is the truth in all of it. Maybe he's maybe they don't know. It's like, is he really representing what the king wants? Is he just playing the fool? Is he pulling the strings behind the curtain?
Extra bonus points. The jester is just the king dressed up like a jester, and everybody can tell, and they're just like, dude, what? So yeah.
No, your one black sheep character can tell, and the rest of them are like, no, this guy's clearly just
right.
And he's trying to nudge him along. He's like, guys, I think that's the king. It's like, will you be quiet while we figure out this mystery? And he's like, okay.
Yeah. Andy wears glasses. Captain Amazing doesn't wear glasses. They're like two different dudes. So mystery men, because we don't like making Marvel references. Really? What? You guys haven't seen it?
I not since it came out.
Do I?
What, like 1998?
I've seen the music video a few times.
Don't hurt my feelings. Yeah.
I was old enough to see it at the time, or well, maybe I shouldn't have, but I did see it.
Jeez, stop hurting my feelings. Yeah, it's like one of the only Ben Stiller movies that I like. So,
really,
Ben
Stiller's in a lot of good movies, dude.
Really, he's in good movies. I don't think he's got like I don't think he's got a huge oeuvre of stuff that I don't even like Zoolander that much.
Like a Dodgeball. Right?
Yeah, Dodgeball's good. I would say
humorous.
Tropic Thunder.
So even Tropic Thunder counts, but not because of
even something really weird. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is surprisingly watchable.
It was okay,
Right. Megamind, right? Apparently he's in The Cable Guy.
Well, does it count if it's like he's there for 5 minutes though?
Probably not. Royal Tenenbaums.
I mean, because Brad Pitt has a great role in Deadpool 2 if we're going by this.
Blades of Glory.
Blades of Glory was stupid.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
I was like, who the hell is he in Megamind? And it's because he's nobody in Megamind. So
really? Is it? Wait,
well, he's Bernard, but Bernard.
I was going to say that's another one. That's Brad Pitt and
Will
Ferrell are the two big roles.
I guess I thought he was the main guy.
And Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
Zoolander. Heavyweights. Come on, Heavyweights.
Heavyweights was back in the day, as for a Disney Channel movie or whatever it was
basically,
yeah.
Well, that, and people like to make that as the unofficial prequel to Dodgeball. Like that was him as White Goodman before he became White Goodman type deal.
Yeah. To be fair, Will Ferrell is another one that it's like almost all of his movies I can't stand. So I haven't seen like Old School and stuff. I haven't seen most of his, like all the classics of his that everybody always quotes. Like I just saw Anchorman for the first time maybe 2 years ago.
I still
haven't seen it. Yeah.
Talladega Nights and Step Brothers is pretty good, but I've never gotten around to Anchorman.
I'm actually with you on Will, I almost called him Will Smith, on Will Ferrell. Like Stranger Than Fiction is
that was a good one.
Movie. See, but it's not really a Will Ferrell movie. Right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly. He's not the Will Ferrell like comedy. Will Ferrell, so
it's sort of like saying, like my favorite Jim Carrey movie is The Truman Show. That's not a Jim Carrey movie. It's just starring Jim Carrey.
Well, it kind of has his energy. He's doing his thing. Like Eternal Sunshine is fine. He's like, less of doing the Jim Carrey thing.
It's not The Mask. It's not even you know the most Jim Carrey movie there is. That's the least Jim Carrey character is was that not 50 First Dates? Whatever that dumb one was with the mind invasion stuff.
Eternal Sunshine.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That's Jim Carrey's actual personality in that entire movie, right? Not put on the show
at the time, maybe.
I don't know.
It was also like 30 years ago. So
he's pretty self-absorbed.
I can see he's doing the least amount of Jim Carrey energy because he's being
that's
more
what
of a
I'm
real person.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing. There are certain guys that have enough. Like I feel like there's a spectrum. So Jim Carrey's got the crossover stuff, but you still. I think I would agree that there's still the idea of a Jim Carrey movie, whereas you have guys like Steve Carell and Adam Sandler that have bridged the gap enough where it's like, oh no, there's an Adam Sandler movie mindset, but like you take him seriously when he does his thing.
Yeah, what kind of Adam Sandler movie is it?
And then Steve Carell is kind of just like he's just a good actor.
Right.
Who happens to have also done a lot of good comedy stuff.
I think Steve Carell is my favorite of all of them. With the crazy thing with Adam Sandler, like 50 First Dates is definitely an Adam Sandler movie. It's not even I don't think it's his production company or he directed or wrote it. He's just the star, but it's definitely the Adam Sandler energy. But then he also had his Uncut Gems and some of the other super
Spanglish,
serious, funny people,
Love, all that stuff.
Even Click, I think, was one of those. It was a little bit more sentimental than the thing is. That Adam Sandler's comedy is kind of all about making fun of weirdos, and I'm not a weirdo, but all these other people in the movie that I hired are. Excuse me? That's kind of like Adam Sandler's whole thing.
Yeah, I think he's okay to admit that he plays the weirdo, or he might call it.
No. He's rarely the weirdo. Like a lot of his movies, he's not the weirdo. Like something like Waterboy, sure, he's the weirdo, but a lot of these other movies, he
Happy Halloween or whatever it is, definitely the weirdo in that. So
no, I haven't seen that.
Little Nicky, he's the weirdo,
right?
I would say
there's always that. There's always that he's in those he's even kind of putting on the show. I'm not actually a weirdo. I'm just pretending to be weirdo so you can laugh at weirdos. It's kind of like a kind of a nastiness that I'm not really into. Whereas Steve Carell, it's always much more kind of personable and charming. Like even 40-Year-Old Virgin.
It's extremely sincere.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And heartfelt, and not lame sentimentality, right?
The joke is on himself in a sincere way. In 40-Year-Old Virgin, it's not like I'm making fun of that guy over there. It's like this is me in my awkward life and now like the audience can just enjoy it. But I think it is better when it is played so sincerely instead of now we're all laughing together, because it kind of takes away the enjoyment for me. It's no longer amusing if I'm laughing with the character at it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, you mean laughing with the actor at this character who's not the yeah. He really puts on. There's that one movie where he's like a single dad. He's like he writes puzzles or something, and he meets this girl, but it turns out to be his brother's fiance. You don't know? You guys haven't seen that one?
No.
Oh, well, great movie.
Who did what now?
I don't know.
You've turned so many times. I'm not even sure which actor we're talking about.
No, this is Steve Carell.
Yeah, see, that's why I was like, are we still talking about Adam Sandler? And isn't that Mickey? And yeah, I don't think I've seen that one. I don't watch like a ton of his movies, but I don't really avoid them either. But I mean, I don't disagree with anything you guys have seen or said, you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he does a ton of comedy, but yeah, like most of the movies of his that I've seen aren't like, other than like Despicable Me and whatever, but
well, you know, his was the early stuff like Bruce Almighty and Anchorman, where he was more of the bit part anyway.
Right.
And then, you know, he moves into the more serious stuff, quote unquote, that still has comedy in it, like Crazy Stupid Love and
like Dan in Real Life. That's what I was thinking of. Dan in Real Life. Great. It's very a charming movie, kind of a slow burn. It's one of those early 2000s, mid 2000s awkward comedies where you kind of just ratcheting up the social tension, and it's kind of things get more and more socially awkward. You're supposed to kind of feel that comedy of errors pressure to it, and it works really well. Highly recommend. Charming, not much of a movie, but not much of a bad movie. It's got Dane Cook in it, weirdly too.
Oh, well then, no, thank you.
That explains everything. You know, it's kind of funny, but not really, you know, so.
Oh, ooh, ouch.
Well, I've seen 2 of his movies, which are the only 2 I can think of that he was actually in. No, he's been in 3 that I've seen. I saw the Costco one, Employee of the Month, right? I saw the Good Luck Chuck one, where it's like he has sex with the woman and then they find their soulmate, the very next person that they go on a date with type deal. And then the only serious movie, quote unquote, I've ever seen him in was what the hell was his name? With Kevin Costner, I think, where he's a serial killer and he wants to be like him, but I don't remember the name of it. Now I'm gonna have to look it up because it's gonna bother me. Because this was a weird time, the mid 2000s.
The aughts, is that what we're talking about? All the way back then?
No, I'm talking about like 2010, 11, 12.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. Mr. Brooks, that's what it was. No, it was 2007. I was a little off.
Cody got you. I wasn't 100% sure if he was answering the thing or not, but yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
It was an interesting movie.
Do you guys know of any kind of like a crowd-pleasing movies that aren't blockbusters, that aren't kids movies, that just kind of hit that thread, that needle of being pleasant?
Well, how do you define? Are you defining blockbuster as made by a motion studio or based on the budget? Because the first Deadpool would count, I think, sure, because it was only like 70 million.
No, I think a blockbuster in terms of like effects-driven or action-driven, rather than just kind of grounded in reality. Like you could be maybe even like a slight thriller, like a Memento, but something that is mostly carried by the strength of the acting and the characters and the writing, rather than a lot of other even practical effects.
I don't have a box in my head for all that shit that you just asked, so I don't just have.
I would have said all the Arnie movies, except those are very action based. So
right,
you see what I mean? Though,
except for like Twins and Junior and
Well, I mean, even Kindergarten Cop, I think would. I think Kindergarten Cop relies mostly on the strength of the character work versus the act. Like that's not a lot of. There's plenty of action in it, but there's not like a lot compared to
right?
Predator, for instance.
Yeah. Last Action Hero. Like, again, the name somewhat misleading, but I mean, since we're talking about Arnold, but I mean, the category movies, what you were describing to me was like, isn't that just cult classics, right? You want it to be a general appeal, but it wasn't big in the box office, and people.
Well, no, it could have been big. I'm fine with it being like a hit. I'm more thinking blockbuster in terms of like a high concept, one big hook. Effects driven, like all the Marvel movies, all the action movies, all like Mission Impossible, all that stuff is in my mind blockbuster. Even Jaws is basically high thriller action, or trying to be the action movie. I'm trying to think of like a general audiences movie that's not a kids movie, that's not lots of heavy action, because I feel like there were a lot of those at one point. Even some, weirdly enough, we saw Mr. Mom recently. Have you seen Mr. Mom? I think it's really aged well, right? Despite I wouldn't have thought it aged well, but I think it did. But it's a small cast. I don't know. I'm trying to think of just these likable movies, and there were a lot of them at one point, but nowadays all the biggest movies, all the movies you think of, are all have that sci-fi, fantasy, horror, or action built into it, and all the dramas are like super dour, depressing, everyone's miserable dramas that are just Oscar bait. And there's not a lot of stuff that is grounded but also pleasant.
So we're doing grounded and pleasant, because I was gonna pitch something else, but I guess.
When you say pleasant, do you mean happy ending?
Not somebody to cheer for, somebody to root for is the main character throughout the movie. It's entertaining.
We're getting in trouble. Well, because the movie that I watched recently that just popped into my head when you were describing all of these things is a small cast, and you're rooting for the main guy, and it's just got all these people that you want good things for and whatever. It's called Get Out. So
Oh. It's a little horror movie, man.
Yeah.
Isn't that basically a horror movie?
Yes. Okay. But it isn't until like the last 20 minutes. And even at the end, you're still rooting for the guy, and there's not like a ton of action. And, but yeah, that's why your definition of pleasant is important here. Because otherwise, like, the main thing that came to mind, and Cody and I on the same wavelength, surprise, was Princess Bride, right? Princess Bride it's just in too many categories, right? It's just too perfect. It's not fully a kid's movie, right? Whereas like Neverending Story, I would say, is fully a kid's movie. Goonies, Sandlot,
apart from that one part.
Movies. Yeah, so that one moment when Neverending Story is like probably more horrific than anything that happens in Princess Bride.
What, the horse?
That's true.
Yeah.
Get over it, guys.
No. I don't give a shit about the horse. Everyone else on the planet gives a shit about the horse. Everyone else says that's like their big first, oh my God, my childhood was scarred and I didn't even realize, based on the kind of movies I got back in the day.
The thing about that movie is the whole memory thing. The memories and the marbles, and they're all like, no, he's forgetting everything. That's the drama that really got me.
What about Willow, or is that two kids? So,
well, no,
or like, two action maybe. There's armies in it, and a wizard duel.
The kind of sweet spot is Jimmy Stewart in a suit, being chased by murderers, but he managed to thwart them using the everyman managed to thwart people with his clever solutions to problems. He's very resourceful. The resourceful everyman in
murderers, not horror, or
no, like
I mean, Sherlock Holmes could have fit that.
Mobsters, right? Or gangsters, or
thriller,
conspiracy, spy people, or whatever. Like everyman spy thriller would be fine. Was it
The Fugitive, or is that too blockbuster?
Yeah, that would work. I think that would work.
Ben, do you watch anime?
Well, see, I love anime.
Let me know when you're done.
Recommendations for somebody who doesn't watch animation as a rule, but what do you have in mind?
So there's one that I watched recently called Spy Family or Spy X Family or something.
Yeah,
isn't that newer?
That's cute.
It's quite adorable.
It's very cute.
Yeah, it's just like that might be the thing. Like, it's very pleasant. It's very adorable. It has spies. It has some amount of murders. It's just like I don't know. It's very cozy in its own way.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
And it doesn't really go anywhere very fast. It kind of has an overarching plot, but it's not really.
It goes there slowly. It's somehow it's a sitcom.
Yeah,
with all of the setting of it's like kind of sort of fake 1960s, and it's got crazy spies. It has a telepathic kid, and it has an assassin that's kind of clueless, and secret police, and all sorts of weird things and that's crazy hijinks. It's very charming.
Man, yeah. So these are not recommendations for myself. They're recommendations for someone else who, unfortunately, also has a no animation rule. It's too kiddie, apparently. Like I know.
Well, so the internet, right? So I found a list that I'm not going to otherwise endorse, but I'll send you afterwards. So Stardust, Scott Pilgrim, Secondhand Lions, these all would have been on my list if I had thought of them in the moment.
Hunt for the Wilder People was a good one too.
Did you just start with the S's, or is that where you ended up randomly on the page? Because that was
that's the top comment, actually, like the top 3 comments. You know, if we're talking spy thriller stuff, Hunt for Red October.
Oh yeah, no, that was his.
How about something like Jumanji or Hook? Would that count?
Those could be kid movies, though. I would say Jumanji's a little bit more general purpose than Hook would be for sure. There you go. That's closer. So there you go. Robin Williams movies.
Yeah.
Lover.
It's been
let's get it all
ever
out.
since I've seen any of these movies, but it's just like I think they still had like happy sort of ending, so sort of someone you can root for. I think.
Yeah, I mean, Hook should be general purpose, but I could easily see that being canned as a kid's.
Yeah, no. Between the two, I would say Jumanji is a stronger general audience one versus Hook.
The Good Place is a good one too. Despite being kind of high concept, it has it's sharply written, funny characters, doesn't waste your time.
The Martian.
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen that in forever since that came out.
I'm sort of in the middle of reading it, and you know, I feel like they did a pretty good job with the adaptation. So I'm all like, oh yeah, I know where this is in the movie and who's
kind of more. There's more episodes in the book, is basically what it amounts to.
Oh no, I'm sorry. You're talking about the Matt Damon one. I was thinking My Favorite Martian.
Totally different.
Which I definitely have not seen in forever.
You're not thinking
Martian I've seen more recently.
Mission to Mars with
Oh no! I didn't know anybody else knew that movie existed. So
oh yeah,
I know Mars. I know Mars Attacks. I can give you that.
No, not Mission.
Mission to Mars wasn't that Val Kilmer? Like
I've seen what's that other one? No, it's
Red Planet.
Oh yeah, that's right. They came out at the same time. So
I remember now being very confused because there was a bunch of Mars movies coming out at the same time when I was a kid, and like one of them kind of had some form of plot line of they were terraforming Mars and they had to take their helmets off, and I think that one was the one with Val Kilmer.
Right. Yeah. Like it's Russian. It'll probably get 10 feet off the ground, explode, and I'll still live longer than all of you. So.
Well, no, I was actually thinking of the. It wasn't that. It was the one with the Paul Rubens look-alike. You know what I'm talking about? It's this comedy, kids comedy. At one point, they're on a mission to Mars. He misses the cryogenics. He ends up just growing out a beard and not being in cryogenics for the whole duration of the flight. You guys haven't heard this movie?
Nope.
I know Passengers, where Chris Pratt's thing wakes him up, but that's a very different theme. It was a bad movie.
Yeah. Along the lines of like Secondhand Lion, Big Fish. What was the other one?
Big Fish is a very emotional movie.
Big Fish is phenomenal. Big Fish is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking of the 1997 movie Rocket Man.
Naturally.
Obviously. Like
preceded only by I believe it was 1996 movie Meteor Man.
Weirdly enough, I had to say that because there's the Elton John movie.
And but that makes sense as to why it was called that.
Do they have good movies? Because we should throw Pluto Nash in here.
I mean, listen, if we're throwing in bad movies.
But they had to be crowd pleasers. They had to be something that people can enjoy. So does
What
that
about
mean
the
bad movies?
The Addams Family
So-
movies? Those seem to have garnered
Sure.
a lot of like
Addams
those
Family.
skirt the edge, but like a lot of people still like them even when they grow up.
Right. To throw Eddie Murphy a bone, I was going to say, the Axel, like at least the first two.
Oh well, Beverly Hills Cop, I think would have to fall into the blockbuster type, especially as they went on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Fine.
the first one, I think you could make the argument that that's much more of a grounded, general, like easier
so
going.
Buddy cop movies are out then, so we don't have to talk
Well,
about
a lot of them, like Lethal Weapon, definitely
Bad
ratchets
Boys
up as
or-
time goes on. Even if the first
as time goes on. Yeah. Does the first Terminator or Alien count? Because it's just like 4 dudes, even except for that poor police.
I think you can make the stronger argument for the first Terminator versus T2, which is clearly a blockbuster.
Obviously, I would agree. Yeah.
Whereas I think Alien is also Aliens 2 is definitely the blockbuster movie.
Right.
Versus that. But that's the same like A New Hope to Empire. Empire is the blockbuster movie.
Sure.
Even though A New Hope became a blockbuster in it, but that was a different case.
Right.
So it seems to be the sequel is the one where you take it that way.
Yeah, I said there probably is a sweet spot for like more buddy cop types of movies that I haven't. It's not necessarily a genre. It just came to mind, when I went down the like Beverly Hills Cop train.
Well, Rush Hour.
You got Rush Hour, Training Day. What's the one with?
Training Day's probably not the right theme.
You don't think it's okay?
I think it's a little bit too much bad.
Very
people.
adult. That one's very adult.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair.
I was wondering about LA Confidential, but I know I'm just
Is that the one with Harrison Ford in it? Because that's what's
no LA
that was the
Confidential
other
has
one I'm trying to come to mind. But
the fucking Memento guy and Russell Crowe and what's her face? I've forgotten the people. I'll remember them all in a minute.
Right.
Harrison Ford was
It's
in a buddy
noir.
cop movie.
Yeah, he did a they're like cops in LA and
Oh, Hollywood Homicide.
oh, that's what it is. Yeah.
It was him and Josh Hartnett. I haven't seen that one since it came out, but I remember liking it. Oh, The Other Guys. That would be a good one too. Then with Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling.
Oh, I thought you think The Other Guys with Will Ferrell.
Oh yeah, no. Then what's the name of their one? The shit.
Indeed.
Nice Guys. That was it. The Nice Guys was the Russell Crowe and but that's definitely not a kids movie or even skirting close to it.
Yeah, the big, I think the big turnoff is a lot of the quote unquote adult themed violence that's really more just gruesome and unnecessary. That's the big turnoff, and a lot of these movies, even Memento had that, unfortunately.
So Kick-Ass is out then. I'm just kidding.
I didn't
So-
like Kick-Ass. I thought Kick-Ass was stupid.
No, I generally agree. I don't think I've actually seen it all the way through, though, is probably part of the problem. But it was funny because IMDb has it as like number 16 on this list of feel-good movies. And like, what? I'm assuming this list isn't actually ranked by anything known to people. School of Rock, does that count as a kids movie because there's a bunch of kids in it?
I think it's a great movie. I think it's that's definitely one.
I mean, there are edges of this where it's like I would say the Pirates of the Caribbean is clearly a blockbuster, but that seems like it hits all the marks for
Sure.
Like that would be the very top of this list if we included it and gave it a pass as not being a blockbuster. But
I think
it probably still is.
It still won't be because at the very top you're gonna have Princess Bride, and then there's like another.
No, I mean no. I don't mean necessarily in quality, although I could maybe argue the strength of it. I'm talking more about the spirit of the question as it's clearly a blockbuster, but like it's
so I guess when I was the spirit of the question, I think I'm thinking of it is more of something that is grounded that could happen that's not set in any special setting. Without any kind of special setting.
So no fantasy.
Well, that's the problem. Is a lot of these movies have these twinges of fantasy or sci-fi or other things without just being kind of grounded in reality and having some kind of positive appreciation for
The Mask of Zorro.
That's a great one.
I suppose so. That could do it. It's still very action.
I mean, there's some violence in that. But...
No, there's plenty of violence. I'm just at this point now. I'm just trying to name good movies that I haven't seen in a while.
That's fair.
I don't know. Just the point.
Well, I mean, we could do a lot of period pieces, but they would all be very action heavy.
I don't mean to sidetrack the whole thing with this.
It was either this or D&D. So whatever.
The larger point is just it's been frustrating trying to find kind of grounded, quote unquote, realistic movies. Obviously, it's not always realistic with a rootable protagonist, not necessarily, basically a happy ending, but it could have real tension and real stakes and real thrills. For a general audience, it's not particularly gruesome, dour, or depressing.
If we're not throwing animation out, a lot of the good Disney movies do fit that.
Right, like a lot of Pixar movies, but arguably.
And that's the other thing I've run into. Yeah, all the stuff that has that, it's not live action anymore; it's all animated, and that's
sure.
So you have to really.
This person needs to expand their horizons in some direction or another.
Yeah.
Right.
I really appreciate animation. One of the reasons I love animation is because in America, that's pretty much where you find that kind of storytelling. Like Batman Caped Crusader was getting pretty close to that. If you guys have a chance to see it yet, it's on Prime. It's the latest Batman.
I haven't, but I'm getting the kids worked through all their DC animation stuff.
I don't think it's better. I don't think it's better than the DC animated universe, but it's trying. Right? It's probably the best thing since the DC animated universe.
Yeah, sorry, reading chat. So, but
it's just Cody.
Yeah, chat. Look, man, I've seen the streamers with like three people. We still call them chat, okay?
No, you do. I call them by their name.
Right. I've also called him out by his name this episode.
Although to be fair, Girk is there too. Hello, Girk. I don't want you to feel unseen, but Cody is dominating the chat because he's a narcissist.
No, because he and I are on the same wavelength, and we've seen a lot of movies apparently. So, yeah, we had a lot of.
Are there more people in chat or on stream right now?
Now that your kid is here,
I was like, definitely the kid is tilting it the wrong direction. So,
oh, she's so happy now.
Oh, who wouldn't be? You get a shout out on a quality stream like this. And notice neither Andreas, and by that I mean the same Andreas, has not bothered to show up because he's busy watching the movie that I managed to see last week. He has to wait all week apparently for some reason.
Is it any good?
It's. I liked it. Yes, it's still stupid nonsense, but since it's the Deadpool stuff, well, it's the kind where you can appreciate it. They've already shown they're going to take the absolute wrong lesson from this movie, but for what it was enjoyable and it was funny enough, and there was enough in it where I was like, yeah, no, I'm not. I understand why these cameos are here and this, that, and the other thing. So cool, and now I can be done with you forever.
No. Not just until the next one. So
no, I mean the MCU, because there's nothing else. Oh. There's literally nothing else that I'm even remotely, even vaguely interested in.
But really? Robert Downey Jr. is returning as Dr. Doom.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Isn't that great?
Stop.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say the fans don't have a point, but for me anyway, it should not be surprising that it's like Marvel's got enough credit that it's not going to be stupid, whatever the reason is that they've done it. I just wish we would have gotten that up front. It's one of those things where like sometimes the big studios are like, we're going to do this wildly controversial thing. We're not going to explain it for literally years and just expect that everybody's going to have the same kind of idea that they're just going to be like, oh, everybody's going to be cool with this. No, dude, you can't just recast arguably the biggest actor in your IP as a total freaking villain, and it's not like we don't know what Robert Downey Jr. is going to sound like under the mask, right? So it's not like they cast Gary Oldman as like three different people and you're like, oh right. Yeah, well, it was Gary Oldman and he's a totally different dude every time. He's still going to be Robert Downey Jr.
Well, and that's the thing. It's not like he doesn't even have the chops to play the character. It's just you've already made him this essentially icon. I'm comfortable using that word for what Iron Man is, as far as his role is concerned in it, for what it helps spawn. But I mean, everyone's already predicting like, well, this is just going to be the multiverse version of essentially Tony Stark goes bad, because that was a comic storyline where he is Doctor Doom. And it's like, so you've taken the wrong lesson from this. You're not making a character, you're building it based around the actor.
I'm skeptical, right? They've got a lot to justify, because, you know, canon originally, the Fantastic Four was space age, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a big deal. Tony Stark wasn't really, like, even, you know, I think he was always the 80s, wasn't he? Or at least was big in the 80s. But it's like,
well, no, they all came out around, like, them, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, they were all generally within the 60s or the very early 70s at the worst. But Iron Man's slant was always the war stuff, you know, the grounded.
Part of the difference is, though, too, right, is like, you know, like Doctor Doom and the Fantastic Four are tied together pretty closely. And you've got, this isn't just like, well, you know, what if Iron Man was bad and then he's Doctor Doom? That's not doing honor to either character, right?
No.
And so that can't be the answer entirely, is kind of what I'm looking for. And that's why I'm like, I'm curious what they're going to do with the Fantastic Four as far as the MCU. And it's supposed to be, you know, starting out in an alternate universe anyway, I think. But the other, like, I'm going to put this out there because I'm not saying I'm going to put a lot of money on this or anything, but it's just such a big potential feint as well to me, that they're like, everybody go look at Robert Downey Jr. and we're going to do something else. But that, like, I've seen some analysis that they're like, they've seen contracts or like supposedly stuff has come out about the money he's supposed to make from this role that really kind of undermines that argument. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, I just don't see even you come out and say
it's a desperation play. I take it as a desperation play. I haven't seen the Marvel movie since Endgame. I'm not really worried about it. Even that Spider-Man movie that came out right after, that everyone said, hey, it's actually pretty good. I'm like, I'm kind of done with it. I've got the big capstone event. It feels like it's over.
I'm super shocked, actually. You're actually the most balanced voice in here. You represent America. So please tell me more about the post-Marvel world.
I think it's generally a lot of, I don't think it's just for superhero fatigue. I think there's also been, I'm not a social scientist, but declining returns. I don't know if it's declining.
Oh, you know, it's not. If these were still good movies, no one would care if they kept making them.
And so this is the desperation play. Oh, remember Robert Downey Jr.? You liked him.
Sure.
And superhero fatigue is the excuse they like to shunt off for the fact that they've made shit movies. If they had continued to make capstone stories of the quality of the first three phases, everyone would still be on board. No one would care. It would continue to be the greatest cinematic achievement of all time. This, that, and the other thing. People just want the good movies. Right. And so
go back to phase one. The superhero fatigue is the creative side, not the fan side.
Right.
Hey, that's smart. I like that. Yeah.
Because like, I mean, it encapsulates everything that you've said. They decided that to go to the multiverse, which opened up everything. They got Fox and they got Marvel back, like the Marvel mutants back and everything. So that opened up an entire aspect that they hadn't used, and it became quantity over quality is a big part of it, right? And if they went back to, you know, like a phase one style where, you know, like maybe you're not going to have, you know, a single hero carry a movie like you could. You're not going to have a Captain America movie, but like, you know, is the Fantastic Four movie going to be that kind of quality? And the other part of it too is like, I think a big part of why phase one worked is that you weren't just going to go see, it wasn't just Captain America. They made a period movie with Captain America in it, right? Like each of the main movies had a subgenre that you could easily tie to. You know, I'm not doing a good justice for the other ones, but like Captain America especially, I mean, Winter Soldier was Captain America, the spy movie. You know, like, let's get back into writing the movies instead of just throwing 53 people on the screen and just be like, your hero's somewhere, isn't he? Isn't that cool? I've one of my buddies who would probably find some kinship with Ben and his, usual abstention from the Marvel movies and stuff. His dad hadn't seen like any of them, and so they went on a Ben to go rewatch them, and he's like, this is going to get EG actually, so I'm going to watch for his reaction. But it's like, why didn't you tell me that Captain Marvel was good? And I was like, all the time, dude. Like, I told you all of these movies were good, right? But it's kind of funny because it's like, yeah, a lot of the older movies now, people liked, and you're looking back and you're like, where did they go wrong? And I think a big part of it was like, they got Fox and they reabsorbed all of that, IP, and they're like, there's too much. We don't know what to do. I think
maybe part of the problem is there are a number of there's kind of a set number of classic comic stories you can adapt. That's one direction, and then there's the giant crossover movies.
Sure.
And you can kind of mix it up by doing a little bit of here, a little bit of there, which they kind of did for a while. It seemed like after a while, it became a lot more. They ran out of classic superhero stories, or they relied too much on the giant crossover multiverse stuff, and that's based on what you're saying. That sounds like kind of maybe what happened. I don't know.
Part of the problem is they've gone. I mean, you could look at any movie post Endgame, and you tell me a single one of them that the plot isn't the world is coming to an end. They have lost entirely the ability to do small scale, like even Winter Soldier, where technically that's essentially a world-ending event, but it's grounded enough that everybody loves it because of the character work. Sure. And the same with more recent one is like Spider-Man No Way Home. It's like, yeah, that's the whole multiverse meshing together and everything's going to blow up. But like, you've got these three characters that are going through this hard time, and that's what you're focused on. So even those small elements help to make films like that ones that people tend to enjoy more. But you don't have, I mean, these shows like, She-Hulk is like, it's your Ally McBeal legal drama, and we're going to focus on the small stuff. It's like, no, you didn't do that. The TV shows would have been a perfect place to do that. They all turn into world-ending events too. It's like, what? Sure. You've lost it, and none of them even save people anymore. Like, yeah. I mean, they made a point of that in the first Avengers movie. That was half their battle, was get the people to be a hero.
Right.
And they don't do that anymore.
You're right. I mean, there's no like street level stuff anymore, right? Even Spider-Man, which, we get goes across around and around and whatever, like he starts as a street level hero, obviously, right? And we've left that way behind. And to expand that a little bit, like, I'm not going to lay this whole world ending event thing solely at Marvel's feet, because that was something that bothered me about Discovery so much. Was like every season of Discovery was like, how's the universe going to end this time, and how can this one starship crew save everybody? And it's like, like that's not what I need to watch. That's not what we were watching in TNG. It wasn't even really what we were watching in DS9, even though the fate of the Alpha Quadrant hangs in the balance and you get reminded every week. It certainly wasn't what you were watching in Voyager. And so it's just kind of funny. Like, maybe that's a more recent media thing, or maybe they were just trying to latch on to Marvel a little bit, and everybody's like, oh, that's what everybody wants. They want nonstop apocalypses. No, we don't need She-Hulk stops the apocalypse, and
it's a writing crutch of like they're getting tension and drive out of the wrong place.
I never saw the She-Hulk. Yeah. So there's a world-ending apocalypse in the She-Hulk show.
The She-Hulk one is I actually don't remember. It's not. No, Moon Knight is actually a better example of that, where it starts off slow like, oh, you're in this guy's head, and then it ends with a big fucking kaiju fight in Egypt. It's like, come on, you had your chance. What are you doing?
Right.
Well, and the success story out of all of this, and I know this is not Marvel, but the one everyone talks about is Andor. What makes Andor work and some of these other things?
Well, the fact that it's well written is a good.
Yeah,
it's a good
story. What's the difference? What's the difference between Andor and the Marvel movies?
I would say Andor, for one thing, it's the Empire, but they're not Flanderized. It's not the joke of, oh, stormtroopers sitting there and they can't shoot a bottle. Like, they're actually a threat, for one. Two, it's the character writing, because you're dealing with it's the kind of thing that you could never really get in the first 3 Star Wars movies, because they were a product of what that grand storytelling. But in a galaxy as big as the Star Wars universe, you should have had any number of stories of planets and governments and systems, the kind of things that the prequels didn't land, but where it's like you're dealing with the intricacies of these star systems and the people on a ground level under an oppressive regime.
Right. I mean, everybody knows the one line, right? And that's because it's a character moment, not because it was, some other grand moment during the escape scene. I can't swim. That's it. Where are those moments?
Right. It's like, oh, great. This guy that he's fucked now. Like, and that's what in that moment. It's like this guy you just followed. He finally got his release, and shit, he's either going to die or he's going to get tortured for the rest of his life. Like,
right. And then die. But yeah.
And then die.
Yeah.
He's going to die. Yeah. I mean, fun.
We got 2 different empires we're thinking about, obviously, but yeah. I mean,
I don't think it's just the stakes, right? Because even the first Avengers movie had world-ending threat, right? Captain America had this huge problem too, and even right back to Iron Man, you have what's the big conflict? Warmonger, right? There's a kind of there's a personal element in that story,
right?
But the weakest part of the story is this very good actor. What's his face? He's bald in that movie. Jeff Bridges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that Jeff Bridges and that final conflict is the worst part.
Oh, everyone will tell you that just kind of is like the shoehorned in because this is what we have to do thing.
Right. So it's always been the charming character at the center of it, with the personal struggle you want to root for. That's always been the element that people like in these movies.
The thing about the first Avengers, though, is that you're really not that far away from that grounded character look at what's going on.
But I'm just world-ending threat, giant blue laser, and that's what we've been saying has been the problem with these.
Well, but we've also been saying that excluding the character-driven stuff, right? Like, first of all, it was like one time, right? Or whatever at the time, right? You have
because it's Avengers, the first time you can't necessarily,
right? If they kept the apocalyptic stuff in the Avengers movies, then maybe it would have given it gravitas and it would have given it weight and stuff like that, right? But even still, even in the presence of giant blue laser, as you pointed out, we also have the moments where Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are going to box, and Hulk is going to smash. You've got when is the last time you got character development out of Bruce Banner? When's the last time you got a tender moment? Yeah, right. But that's a thing too. As much as you guys hate on Ultron, that's a thing too.
No, the bones of Ultron are good. It's just the rest of it because it got rushed. It's
right. The other part is Black Widow and Hawkeye, and tender moments like that. You just don't really have that in any of the other ones. By the time they got to, Infinity War and Endgame, right? Like, they've already got momentum. We already know who these characters are. We don't need any more moments. You've got nice beard, and stuff like that. Like, you don't have like a lot of other stuff. But Endgame, I'm going to turn it around a little bit, because I do feel like Endgame got into the character heads a little bit, because you got depressed Thor, and stuff like that. And those are some of the best scenes out of there, right?
So that Endgame was so weird because it almost like it repurposed the worst parts of the MCU up until that point, including like the Thor sequel that nobody really likes, Thor 2. And then that became some of the best stuff in Endgame when they revisited that and recast that.
Mm-hmm. It's the first steps of tying back, and for lack of a better word, it is nostalgia baiting, because they do have they show you the big number on the screen. It's like, this is the year. You remember this? We're going back. And it's like, okay, yes, sure. Cool. But now it's, can we do it?
Right, with perfect resolution, I think to the two best characters of the entire franchise to that point, which is just wonderful to see. And so the great part about, though you might be happy for that the big climactic fight scene with everyone is here, and then there's the lineup ladies do their thing when they have a scene to themselves in the big fight scene. But the thing that people really care about is the funeral and the dance. Those are things people really like, I think. The return of the shield. He took it one step at a time the right way. And no, I don't think I will. That's Endgame is a wonderful capstone to that, and I think everyone's right that the character work is really what sells it.
I'm not as high on Endgame, but yes, I understand that argument.
Oh, you don't particularly like Endgame?
No, I think the character stuff is wildly overblown. They undercut a lot of the Thor stuff by making like fucking fat jokes about him the whole time. Captain America let 9/11 happen. Some memey things, but I mean, like, seriously, you're going to introduce time travel. You've got to account for this shit.
Right.
And they don't at all. But whatever. Yeah, I understand. Endgame, if Endgame was the worst of it, that would be fine. And since then, it's just become like the director's face. It's been completely terrible.
Well, as interested as I am in the subject of the conversation of like writing, I just don't know enough of these movies to be able to
That's
talk
okay.
about.
Listen, you're lucky because we're over.
What would you do?
Okay,
what would you do with a story?
She would not write a Marvel movie, is what she would do.
What would I do with the story? What, Ben?
I'm saying, what would you do with a story that has to be superhero stories, even like an original? What would be the superpower? What would be the conflict? What would be the character?
Don't ask me what superpowers would be.
The director
it just would not be a superhero. It's like I'm just too much into noir for that to.
I was going to say you can. That's the thing with superhero. It's not like it fits into every genre because I mean, like Harry Dresden is a superhero at the most base level term. Anyone that's running around that's able to do things a normal person can't do. Sherlock Holmes is a fucking superhero on the broadest definition.
Right.
And if you want to do the BBC take, maybe, but The Shadow, he's your noir superhero, Batman.
Batman's close. Yeah. I mean, like I tend to like Batman movies because it's still a noir. That's like, those are the ones that I can be drawn to because I can attach to the type of thing. Like a spy movie with a superhero, I can still probably enjoy it. Maybe Never Saw Winter Soldier, who cares? But it was when you were talking about Endgame and Thor and all that, like I remembered out of the Thor 2 movie, which did suck. The best part of it was Loki was distraught that his mom died. Nothing about the ending. I don't remember the fucking plot other than the best part of it was the fact that my character was upset that his mom died.
And he tried to do the most Loki thing about it, which was hide and still put up the front until Thor knew him enough to call him out on it. And then you just see him completely fucking leveled.
Emotional, compelling moment of a character. And and all of the stuff that you guys have been talking about, there is no character driven anything anymore because it is trying to get tension out of the world's ending. And it was one of the things that I liked the most about the first Deadpool movie of it wasn't a world ending event. The guy's girlfriend got kidnapped. It was personal. It was actually emotional, compelling because of that. And that stuff is hard. So it was really hard and difficult to do. And I think as a culture, the writers of these movies have lost that ability. They have not gone through whatever same rigor to be able to make those types of characters. I heard something the other day about referencing the movie Wall Street, that Gordon Gekko, in his monologue about greed is good and all that, that movie kind of caused a spike of people wanting to get into Wall Street businessmen because they liked that monologue and it was intriguing to them. They wanted to do it, but the person who was writing the movie was like, that's a bad guy. Like he's saying,
well, they lost the lesson of that whole movie. It's like when he's talking about how, because it's in that same monologue, I think, where it's like, the guys who come when things are good are great, but what do you do in the bull markets when everything's bad? Are you still making money? Are you still? They take the wrong. It's like the same with Fight Club and Joker and all these movies. They take the wrong lessons from it.
It totally can be, but what was good about the writing of that movie is that character was done well enough that that was a real person, a real fictional person having real fictional feelings that people were able to attach to. We're no longer getting that in our stories currently.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Alec Baldwin got a fucking Oscar based on what, 7 minutes in that movie, or whatever it was. Like
Glenn Ross, that movie.
Maybe it was that one.
Yeah.
Movie.
First prize is sports cars, second prize is steak knives, third prize is you're fired. That was his whole monologue. Pretty much. So I think, so maybe the problem is here, write what you know. It's kind of this perennial writer's advice. And if they don't have this understanding or knowledge of their own experience that they can put into these movies, then what they have to do is they just have daring do and a spectacle. And that's not something not something you can have experience with, or
right.
it doesn't have the verisimilitude. Whereas with personal conflict, you can. And I think you mentioned Batman. Of course, I think what people consider the best Batman movies would be, the Christopher Nolan trilogy or Mask of the Phantasm. And all of these movies, all of these movies.
Who are you talking to? Who even knows about that movie?
Mask of the Phantasm? Anybody who's seen it says that's the best Batman movie. Batman, whatever. But it dives deep into what makes up the central character of the whole franchise. But then that also means that for a superhero movie, it's constantly an origin story. That's part of the problem, I think, with superhero movies.
There is a problem with that in your superhero movies. It's like everything has to be an origin story.
Because that's the conflict. That's what makes somebody the hero. That what gives the conflict.
It's part of the hero's journey. Once you are the successful hero, then what do you do? Because people are not creative enough to be able to there's got to be a bigger bad guy. There's got to be a bigger crisis. And then you have the constant world-ending apocalyptic events, because what do you do at that point? Which is why the literal God is upset that his mom died. And that was interesting.
Right. Or Iron Man 2, it's Iron Man has his father's legacy. It's still on his back. And he's a drunk. And that's basically, they adapt that whole thing. Captain America 2, his friend is out there. He's got unfinished business. Right. So having these new conflicts, but notice these are all tied back to their origins still. Because Tony Stark, his origin is his origins
father. And having a backstory, you don't get to just have a character that just pops out of nowhere. Or maybe you have someone like, amnesia, and that becomes the story. Is that you have to actually put in the work of making a character have real connections and feelings and history that drives them, because that's where interest in people comes from. People
they care about. And Loki's mom, right? I know it's not literally his mom. I think, but still, it feels like his mom. It feels like his mom, right? And
she raised him.
Right. It's like the fact that it was an adopted mother, it's an interesting detail, but that just drives further more of why he's broken up and as he was hiding as this person that I don't care about, that I'm not connected to. Yeah, no, he is broken up about that because that was the person he cared about the most.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, even going back to movies we were talking about, I think it's the Kung Fu Panda movie, right? Like, he's an adopted son in that one. Then they play with those elements later on in the other movies where he finds his quote unquote real family, his biological family. There's plenty of stories that do that, where it's like, or even the second Guardians, right? He may have been your father, but he ain't your daddy. You can play with these things. These are all human things that everyone.
Right back to the problem of the superhero origin, which I think explains what people complain about the villain problem that Marvel has had. Where do these villains come from? Well, the villain's usually a dark reflection of the hero in some respect. That's kind of how you write these stories.
That becomes too easy when you keep doing it and you keep doing it poorly.
Right. Well, and the real problem is that a lot of what makes a villain compelling is understanding their motivation, and Marvel just doesn't give a shit 9 times out of 10, right? Like Thanos, basically, we mostly understood his motivation, and mostly he's a dick. That was his motivation, right? But go down the list of any of the movies, and it's like, so we got Obadiah is driven by greed. Okay, we've got. Hulk likes to smash things. Okay, we've got
fighting. His villain would be he wants to be strong like him.
Sure, we've got fighting a literal Nazi. Okay. Like you just kind of go down the thing, and then like a lot of the other villains, like, I mean, again,
I was gonna say Loki was actually the best one because it was sibling rivalry at its core. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know if that makes him the best one, but maybe
the best of the lot. And who did they bring back for the big crossover movie? Loki.
I think he was easily the strongest villain of the first set of villains. I don't think he is the strongest, but he's up there.
If you're going to follow his entire journey up through Loki season 2, then I'll give it to you hands down, because the entire thing became about Loki's journey. But like him in the movies and stuff like that, I feel like he's being oversold a little bit. So, but
is he being oversold, or is he just the only thing that was moderately good out of a shit movie?
Because I'm a dick to my brother isn't a compelling motivation. Like, and I say that as an older child who was a dick to his brother. So, like that's not a personality, guys. Like, that doesn't make you a compelling villain. It's still, you're just as two-dimensional as literally the Red Skull, the Nazi. Like, you're just an asshole.
Yeah, but that can still be very real. That can still be the motivation. Simple motivations are still motivations. Just give them one. And not just, I'm a mustache twirling villain, I'm going to do all of the wrong things. It's like, just
then that's
like,
all of them.
If it is simple enough of, I didn't get enough sleep because you people wouldn't shut up, and I'm going to destroy the world.
Because you didn't say God bless you when I sneezed.
Well, I mean, ironically, the best one then would probably be Zemo, because he just wants, I mean, it's an easy,
he's up there.
It's an easy way to quantify it as just he wants revenge, but it's like, no, he sees what they are from a different view of, it's that whole leading up to the Sokovia Accords thing. It's like, there are plenty of people who would see these guys as heroes, and there are plenty of people based on their same decisions that we saw them through that wouldn't see them that way, because the building fell on their family while they were busy saving the other people. And that is now, well, then who the hell are these people to have the power?
Because weirdly, the one thing that really worked in the DC extended universe was that opening scene of Batman versus Superman, where Bruce Wayne sees the end of Man of Steel and everyone around him dies.
Yeah, that he had to put into account for the fact that in that entire Man of Steel movie, he doesn't see a single piece Superman, and he doesn't see a single person who's not Lois Lane.
It's the thing people like about that movie. They responded.
Yes, that opening scene is probably the thing.
That is interesting. The problem is you have Zack Snyder behind the wheel.
That is the problem for many things these days. Of his stuff, but that's shunted off to Netflix, and nobody has to watch it if they don't want to.
Right.
Yeah. Even though his Snyder cut version of his 2 shitty Rebel Moon movies are now out, which I find hilarious that they keep letting him do this thing.
And people still hate it, though. That's what
they should. It keeps getting worse.
He's like, no. You guys don't understand. I was under a bunch of pressures that I had to make cuts of the good stuff. So I'm going to do what I did with.
I was going to say the fact that he did that again, and people are still like, it's like, guys, he's just shit at this. I'm sorry if you like it. Like, you can like his stuff, but please don't tell me that I don't understand it. I promise you, I understand it.
I'm walking a fine line, right? Because back in like the 90s and stuff like that, the director's cut was kind of a big deal, right? You had like the extended versions of like the Terminator and Aliens and things like that. Sure. And it's like, when I watch the theatrical or when I watch the TV cut version, I can tell you the scenes that are missing because they were good. They were impactful. In some cases, I felt like they cut scenes that were literally story elements, like the Terminator 2 theatrical cut. The reason why she knows who the T-1000 is, or he does, vice versa, whatever it is because the T-1000's like feet have molded into the grates. That's not in the theatrical release. How do you cut that? But that's in the director release, and that makes it a better story. That means your character was clever. They responded to something that's happening in the moment to me. But like, what's funny about all these new director releases and stuff like that, like, with Zack Snyder and everything, is like, we already have the director's release. It's called The Movie. He was in charge the entire fucking time. He made every cut. No one held a gun to his head and said, make a shitty movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the Lord of the Rings trilogy, we've had this discussion about the extended editions and stuff. But it's like, I understand the groundswell, sort of, that came for the Justice League movie, because he had, the tragedy with his daughter and this, that, and the other thing. But if you do a side-by-side comparison of the Justice League, quote unquote, and the Snyder Cut, and you look at all the interviews leading up to it about how he's like, this is such a different movie and this, that, and the other, and then you watch the movie, 78% is exactly the same thing at a minimum. Snyder added in a bunch of crap to get his Snyder Cut and Black Suit Superman, and everybody clapped. I was like, what are you doing? And now apparently he's managed to do this again with Rebel Moon, but I don't care because I don't have to watch him.
Well, and what's crazy to me too is like Rebel Moon, isn't that supposed to be his like magnum opus or something? Like this is the
this is him.
Movie
100%. This is his original story and his hands off everything. He got to pick anyone he wanted for it. He got all Netflix money thrown at him because they still haven't learned to fucking stop doing that to people.
Right. Yeah, and I mean my big takeaway about
I thought Sucker Punch was already his big, perfect Zack Snyder apotheosis movie.
I would rather watch Sucker Punch than anything else he's come up with in the last
that really does kind
10
of tell
years.
you a lot about what's going on here. But
I mean, it's the same kind of. I think that's, yes, I would say that's a very, very Zack, but it's not really any different than 300, except that I don't remember if Sucker Punch was already a thing or if it was his all by itself versus 300, which is obviously Frank Miller adapted graphic novel, or 300, things like this. So, but they all have the same kind of bombastic slow-mo vibe to it, that like that's his stamp. So I understand why, whether it's his original or it's not, it's still a Zack Snyder movie.
Which is funny. Is it his stamp, or is it just something he started, really coming in a post Matrix world? Because
I mean, who knows? He made a whole big deal.
Early 2000s.
He made a whole big deal of shooting the Snyder Cut and pretending that his entire original vision was to have it in like 4:3 or whatever that cut is. And it's like, no, it clearly wasn't, because you shot the film the other way. Number one. Number two, it looks even worse when you do this funky camera that you spent all this money on for no reason. And it's like, I don't. There are people have pointed. I think it was what was a zombie movie he did? There were literal dead pixels in that movie. Like it's just like
Army of the Dead or whatever.
Yeah. I don't. Whatever.
Yeah. It's a wild ride, because like I liked a lot of his early stuff, but I haven't liked anything for a little while, and then just kind of realizing that his early stuff was just adaptations and he didn't write it, and it's like, okay, so maybe you're an okay director, but somewhere you got it in your head that you should be in charge of the story parts, and that's
and now he's lost the good director part too.
Well, yeah, I don't know enough about the art at that point to be able to differentiate very much, but it's like I don't think like I really liked Dawn of the Dead's my favorite zombie movie even after all this time. He did that. 300, everybody's still talking about it. It's been almost 20 years. All of that stuff, a lot of his early stuff was pretty good, at least well received, box office stuff like that. But now you're just like, what are you doing? Who are you?
Who let you out of the box?
Yeah.
Oh well. Yeah. Questions for another day.
We'll get him on this show. We'll interview him. We'll crack.
Listen, if he makes that, if they actually allow him to go forward with a third one, and that continues to, like, he'll be at the point where he can only get on our podcast.
oh, poor guy. Oh, what a horrible thing to wish on somebody. I don't wish anybody.
Damn it.
Meanwhile, this has been the Not Dresden Files podcast, brought to you by...
Hey, we successfully did not talk about Dresden.
I guess technically the Broken Jars Network.
We mentioned him once as a superhero. So we are funded by viewers like you.
If you like the show, particularly episodes that Andreas is not on, you can support us on our Patreon. The more you pay, the more interaction you get with us. We'll actually answer you in the Discord. The Discord's much cheaper to get into, but depending on the quality of your conversation will depend on how much we talk to you. And by we, I mean me, because the rest of them will talk to any of you.
We have no standards, yeah.
I have some.
Based on the movies you guys watch,